Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I am good, although I broke many of my rules this week on social media. I guess maybe I don't have rules. Maybe that's what I need to admit to myself.
What did you say?
But I just I got into it with the people, and I am once again
Yeah,
reminded how unrewarding that is. But what happened is an MMA fighter who I don't think I'd ever heard of, but he seems to be a legit person out there with a large following, just attacked me out of the blue, and I'll get you what he said here. So I've been active this week on my podcast and elsewhere, trying to push back against some anti-vaccine craziness,
sure.
and just also just to deal with the legitimate controversies around our response to COVID and all of that. And
What? Tell me, will you take the side of trained medical people as opposed to someone with a YouTube channel?
yes,
Is that what you're telling me?
yes. Generally speaking, I mean,
Yeah.
I try to make whatever concession I can make to real uncertainty and understandable fear and the
Oh
vagaries
yeah,
of
sure. Of course, and it is a sliding scale, and even crazy people are right sometimes.
yeah, and
So
just
yeah,
with the
yeah,
sheer statistics of it, it's if you offer a medical intervention for or even a placebo for hundreds of millions and now even billions of people, there will be a considerable number of stories, certainly thousands, even tens of thousands of bad outcomes. And then you have to deal with the people who are absolutely sure they were
yeah.
harmed, and some few
I mean,
people actually were harmed. So,
you can also be very unscientific and build a narrative based on the answer you want to get to, and
yeah,
they're very, very convincing. And lots of people do it. Even, I mean, respectable newspapers do it now. They put forward their proposal and they find three tweets that back that up, and it's ludicrous. And because it's in print and it's in a posh paper or whatever, it's fact, and that's what's scary
yeah,
because they've just, they've the news talks about tweets. Now, to
yeah,
me, that's the
yeah.
wrong way round.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's you can think that Twitter isn't real life, but Twitter drives journalism to an amazing degree, and
Yeah,
it's the kind of thing people write to
yeah,
the controversy they see on Twitter, and it becomes real. Anyway,
yeah.
I've been active on this and other topics this week, and so out of the
Mm.
blue, this MMA fighter tweets, "I don't know Sam Harris. He may be brilliant, but he comes off as a whiny little bitch." Right?
Yeah.
He tweets this to his
That's
500,000
fighting
people.
talk, Sam. What did you
Yeah,
say? Meet me here anytime. Right.
it's hilarious. This is the analogy to road rage, because it's
Yeah.
hilarious how tempting that is. I mean, this is an MMA fighter. Like,
Yeah.
all the photos of
Yeah.
him are sweat and blood covered in spandex, and I'm tempted to say, okay, let's let's meet here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
God.
so
Could it be a quiz? You say, can it be math? What are we what what is this challenge? Is it a crossword puzzle? Can it be a quiz?
I tried to be as balanced as I can be in in a
Through your
circumstance like this.
fear,
Yeah.
through your trembling.
And,
Yeah.
and so I just wrote, this was totally anodyne when I wrote it, but I could see that after I sent it, I actually stuck the knife in a way that was unnecessary, and it made me look snidder than I needed to look.
Right.
So I wrote, which is it, Ben? Trump, vaccines, or the baby Jesus? And
Right.
the
Yeah. Okay. They're good. They're good. I mean,
so
it's a good three. If you had to pick
Yeah,
three, that's a good three. Yeah.
and I didn't know which. So legitimately, it's like there's a 95% chance it's one of those. I didn't do a deep dive to figure out what he was actually pissed off about, but
Yeah.
it has to be. It's almost certainly one of those three. But I realized that if I just tweeted, which has it been, Trump, vaccines, or Jesus? Question mark. It was the baby Jesus topspin that I think made it seem so snide to so many people.
What? Because
I mean, there is.
you're making them care about a trivial, like you're making their beliefs sort of cute and more childish than they are. Do you think? Do you think it's the word baby, or the
Yeah,
fact that they care about the baby Jesus
it's
more
the
than Jesus.
right. It's the modifier. It's working baby in there is sort of calling him and them babies by association. It's like it's your stuffed animal Jesus. I mean, the truth is, I just like saying the phrase "the baby Jesus"
Of
for
course,
some
because
reason.
it's Well, also, can I just say, right? I see your point, and that obviously that is a comeback, and it is a bit snide. But he's called you a whiny bitch,
Yeah,
so I
out of
think you're
nowhere. Yeah,
allowed.
yeah.
I think you're allowed to try and hurt his feelings back. I mean,
Right.
obviously, you shouldn't bother because I look up to you, and you've let me down because this
Right.
is like this is like this is like walking along the street, right, with a lecturer. Someone shouts something from a car, and he shouts something back, and you want to go, well, you don't have to get involved, mate. You've won. You're a lecturer. You're a lecturer. Yeah.
On
No,
that
go on.
point, someone else wrote. Actually, this preceded this attack from the MMA fighter. This person was just responding to something about vaccines. But you'll like this. He wrote, "You make me more certain of my choice to abandon atheism every day. Thanks."
Yeah, that's a really common one, right?
Yeah.
Now that one annoys me because they're suggesting, right, that the belief or non-belief in an all-powerful, omnipotent being is based on their like of Sam Harris,
Yeah.
which seems really
Yeah.
unfair.
or that it's related to any other topic I might touch, right? And that it's a
I'm
choice.
sure I've
right?
had that.
Choice.
Dawkins has had it. It's like they want to try to get back at you because also I think it's belonging as well. I think there's a point where they see different trends of it's cool to be an atheist or it's not cool to be an atheist, and it's just pockets of people. It's not to do with being cool or not. But do you believe there's a God or not? I often get drawn into those arguments, but I do it on face value now. I do it without trying to be personal, even down to explaining. I mean, sometimes very regularly, I have to explain the definition of atheism because there's a misunderstanding about it, and their claim is that my claim is that there is definitely no God. They claim that is my definition of atheism. And I say, no, that's not what my definition of atheism is. But go on. So this guy was embarrassed for you to be an atheist, right?
And then, honestly, I should never respond to any of that, but I just responded. This now strikes me as a bit of a non sequitur, but I said, "Our Lord has risen."
Yeah. Okay.
So that's maybe I should stop drinking wine. What's the diagnosis, doctor?
No, you know what? It's really hard not to get involved, and it is always best not to get involved because
do you think it is? You think it's actually? You don't think there's a line to take here where you mix it up and you have fun and you don't?
Yes,
take it
I do have fun. I do have fun, but what annoys me is that when I'm having fun, some people think I'm angry, and that annoys me more than the argument because I'm never particularly angry. My analogy that I've used, which again is very is very condescending and demeaning, but if you're walking down the street and there's a guy living in a bin covered in his own sick and feces, right, and he shouts, "You fucking arsehole," right, you keep walking. Right? Why? Why do we reply on Twitter? You should keep walking. There's no good can come of it. They can't. No one's going to go. No one's going to go. Well, I saw Sam Harris and Ricky Gervais slam that guy who lives in a bin covered in his own shit. We can't win. We can't get any more kudos.
My problem is actually I'm still torn on this because I do feel like it is occasionally useful to push back. Yeah, I agree with you that it's one thing that's annoying is that it gives a misleading sense of how annoyed you are by this stuff because it's really not. It's more fun in my mind than anything else.
I do it to for the fun of the 99% of nice, normal, rational followers that I have But this is my rule, okay? If it's done in good faith, if it's a genuine question that isn't pointed or argumentative or they make up their own mind, if they genuinely say something like, "Why don't you believe in God with all this evidence?" I know that that's a good fact. I say, what evidence? but I do it in good faith and I have an argument. If I think they're just a troll or they're mad or they're angry or they want to hurt my feelings, I ignore it because no good can come of it.
Right.
And I think that's more annoying and they go on. And the other thing is that often now I should check the timeline as well before I do it. And I think, what's the best that can happen with this tweet? Right.
Hmm.
And it's usually just ignore it. I've written tweets before and I thought, what's the best that can happen? Just it's already, it's already gone in my mind. I've moved on to something nicer.
Hmm.
But if they're properly mad, and that makes it funny, I just retweet it. So without comment. So
Right.
everyone else does the work for me. And then after about 3 minutes, I look and I see the arguments they're having and I delete the retweet. So it doesn't exist. I've had my fun. My followers have had my fun. That is their fun as well. And it sort of doesn't exist anymore. It was like a little dream. Yeah, it's so. I often think, what's the best that can happen? And sometimes someone says something horrible, like The Office was shit, mate, right? And I think that's an odd thing to say. And I look down the timeline, and he's tweeted me 50 times, and the other 49 have been compliments, but I didn't see them. He didn't get noticed.
Right.
So he's tried a new tactic, right? So some people will tweet me and I'll just an insult, I'll like it. And then they go, can't believe it, I got a like off my favourite comedian. And I want to go, this is no way to live. This is no way. I actually put a line in Afterlife because of it where say, why would people rather be famous for being awful than not famous? And Twitter is that in a mobile phone, the mobile phone that holds all of humanity.
Yeah.
if you could balance it, but it's just not real because people don't act the same. Even if it's a good sample, everyone's acting slightly different than they would if you meet them. There's no way. I've never been insulted on the street. I don't get many on Twitter. Actually, it's 1 in 1,000. But no one ever shouts something from a bin or a car, or no one ever comes up to me and says, I didn't like your show last night, because people don't act like that. They just don't act. That's real.
Do you ever block people?
Yeah, again, usually not. Usually I don't bother. But sometimes I block people if I think, again, that they just want my attention. If what they've said isn't funny, or, it's difficult to say. Sometimes I just feel like it depends if I think they'll like it or not. Because some people are proud
I've decided not to
know,
care about that, because some people wear that as a badge of victory, that you took the time to block them. But that's a real misunderstanding of what it is to be blocked, because it's just, the truth is, you just don't want to hear from this person anymore. And it has
that's always better. That's the lesser of two evils. Yeah, you don't even know they're grateful or just shouting about it, and unless someone tells you.
Well, the other thing is, I've blocked some prominent people at this point, because what I've noticed, first of all, I went for years without blocking anyone, thinking,
yeah, me too,
it just wasn't worth the time, and also just that people would find it gratifying. But the reality is that Twitter was becoming, at least that side of Twitter was becoming unusable. I mean, it was just turning me into a misanthrope, because I was just seeing all the awfulness of humanity. Yeah, and you really only have to block a tiny minority of people to really clean up the world for yourself. It's just But the other thing is, they're prominent people who, if they're following you, I mean, you probably get this less than I do. They're following you for the purpose of then doing something awful with the thing you've put out, right? Like, they're malicious followers, and if you block them, you're under no obligation to keep reminding your enemies that you exist and of the next thing you put out. So why not just block them and disentangle yourself from their malignant fixation on you?
Yeah, and also I don't suffer from that at all. I might see, I have to look at a lot of Twitter with 14.5 million people to even see any negative things, because most people are normal. Most people are following you for a reason. They like this. Also, you can modify a tweet. You can tweak it very slightly, which means you get less offense from it. Or, like, I did a tweet today which was something like, I'm still surprised at how stupid some people are, right? And then all I added to it was, I should have learned by now.
Right.
Maybe I'm stupid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that made it so
Yeah.
much more palatable and fun, and everyone was agreeing with me. If I'd have just left it, there are so many stupid people now. I
You would have
guarantee
reaped the
some
whirlwind.
people
Yeah.
are going, you elite, who are you saying? Who's stupid? What are you saying? That, that sometimes you just take the edge off it. You just take the edge off the tweet.
Well, I discovered, this is the last thing I'll say about Twitter. Also this week, I discovered the law of karma is perfectly proven by by the dynamics of Twitter, because this actor who I hadn't known about, seemingly a very nice guy, who he just tweeted about my meditation app. He tweeted something very nice about it, recommending it, and I looked at his timeline, and if ever there was proof of the possibility of having a completely different human experience than the one I'm having on social media, is to see his timeline. Because even tweeting about me, a sometimes controversial figure, he's this young, I think he's probably 30, very handsome actor who's I think he was in a vampire movie or something. He owns a bourbon company with his very handsome brother. All he gets back, I mean, literally all he gets back, are responses from beautiful women saying that they love him. I mean, it's just absolute inundation from all over the world, from 18 to 22-year-old women saying, just please come back to spend more time on Twitter. Well, how are you? We love you. I mean, it's just...
I thought you were going to say he gets nothing but grief.
No.
I thought you were going to say
no,
it's
they've completely ignored the content of any tweet. The tweet that referred to me there was zero engagement with the actual content of the tweet. It was just,
it's the same with
we love you,
like boy bands and stuff, like that guys from One Direction. They just suddenly say something like, "How is everyone?" And it's like 200,000
yes.
comments. Just love you. I love you.
Yes.
I love you. It's like
this was the most rewarding experience possible. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about that actually, because I did a tweet today to help me with this phone call, really. And it was, how do you intend to improve your life? Okay. And I said, you've really got to mean it, and you've got to think you're going to do it. What one thing you do from now on would improve your life? And no one said, I've got to make more money or get a bigger house or even get a better job. In fact, so few relatively were hedonistic things like travel the world more. It was all about self-improvement and well-being and, in short, happiness. Now, likewise, a while ago, I did, what's your favorite quote? And they were all inspirational, not funny or provocative or political. They were all inspirational. And I wondered if either I've created this culture now that I have got nice followers, right? Or the pandemic and austerity and corruption at the top has made people realize the important things. And my poll's very unscientific, but it did seem, I assume it's skewed towards people over 30 or 40 or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's affected young people, but there seems to be a groundswell of people at least saying the right things about what to hope for and wish for. Then you go on Instagram and it's everyone with their abs out next to a boat that isn't theirs, wearing a £1,000 watch. So I don't know who to believe. I don't know. So what advice could, not that we know anything, but what do you think is good advice?
I think I've just demonstrated that with my Twitter usage for the week.
Don't argue. Don't argue with trained killers. Don't argue with people that can break your legs.
Well, that's the other thing I get, because I have this meditation app. A lot of what comes back at me is, why don't you use your own meditation app?
Me personally, I've always felt that I took the shortcut, that happiness was the most important thing, even as a kid, right? But now. And that was tied up with this, I suppose, honor and integrity, all those things that you pat yourself on the back for, being a good person. But talking to you, I'm torn again because of what you said about the billionaire altruism. Earn as much money as you can and be in control of how you can change the world better than someone else. And, that makes me think, I do just want to do all the adverts I've turned down. I do just want to do things that that I'm not proud of, but I can give £1 million to a dog charity. And I thought, but then you wouldn't enjoy that. But I think I would, because I'd have all the right things as well. I'd know I was doing good. I'd have pride. I'd have worth. And who cares if people understand an actor does an advert and he doesn't mean it. But I'd be vocal about it, and I'd say I'm giving my profit to charity so they people didn't hate me or think I was greedy. So I could sort of have it all, really. And the only thing is that people would go, "Oh, he does rubbish now." But I think, yeah, but I've saved 1 billion dogs, and you're still torn. Integrity is still there's a price to pay.
Yeah. Well, so that specific case of doing advertisements you wouldn't otherwise do is an interesting one, because it actually does come at some cost, because, I've been on the receiving end of that. I've seen, actually very, very recently, also this week, I saw some sports figure, it might have been Shaquille O'Neal in one, and then somebody else in some actor in an ad. And my first thought was, why are they doing those ads? It never occurred to me that they're giving the money to charity. In fact, I don't, I suspect they're probably not, but who knows? But my first thought was, did he somehow go bankrupt and I didn't notice? I mean, he did mishandle his money, and why is he doing an insurance commercial? So I think from just a publicity side, you're not crazy to think about that piece of it. But in your case, obviously, you're so vocal with your fans that they could understand what you're up to. But I mean, obviously, there are other ways for you to make a lot of money and give a lot of money away.
I think I think one of the big reasons I didn't do, I have done, and but the reason I didn't do some things like that wasn't because I thought people thought it was bad work or they'd think less of me. It was because I'm not an actor; I'm a comedian, and there's a certain amount of responsibility that I have to be able to point the finger at anything.
Because there's no distance between you and your persona. Yeah, right.
If I do an advert for really Coca-Cola, I can't make jokes about Coca-Cola anymore. Whatever. On that trivial level.
Oh, I think I was misunderstood where you were going there. But I think the other aspect to it is that when you do an advertisement, you are Ricky. I mean, you read as Ricky Gervais doing the advertisement, not as Ricky Gervais, the actor, playing a role.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think it would be slightly different with an advert, because they wouldn't think that I'd written it, even though I have with some. I've said I've got to do it and make it funny, and because tell me the facts. But that is the difference between a comedian and an actor. People know that an actor puts on a rubber suit and pretends to be someone else, whereas they think that a comedian means it all, which is, again, not quite true. I have to explain this live, that not everything I say, I mean. I take on the view that makes the joke best. I'll pretend to be right-wing, left-wing, clever, stupid, whatever that makes the joke funniest. Yeah, and now and again, you have to stand up and be counted. You have to say, what do you really think? But there is a responsibility, I think, depending on the product. Like, I wouldn't do a commercial for fur coats, but I might do one for a business that I don't know their dealings. I might if I thought someone else is going to do that advert, they're giving me £1 million to turn up for 10 minutes. I'm going to give that to a dog charity. I don't care whether they sell more of these radios or mattresses or, I don't care. But it is a difficult one, particularly if you do. That's the other thing as well, that you can't do too much stuff and think that it'll be good for charity, because soon your cachet goes down as a voice for charity. They go, well, what's he done in the last? He's done nothing. Why do I believe him? So you've got to sort of keep a certain amount of credibility so people think you're a relevant voice on this issue. So there's
another aspect to this which I've been reluctant to admit to myself, but I think it's working there in the background, which is because I'm increasingly vocal about this thing, the virtue of doing good and even doing good in ways that are uncoupled from the usual rewards of doing good. I mean, finding the most effective but psychologically less thrilling ways of doing good, and even just automate your doing good so that you're doing good even while you're an oblivious jerk on a Tuesday. You're still doing good despite yourself. But with a certain audience, they'll always understand the importance of talking about this stuff publicly. But I do notice that with some other people, I mean, people disposed to think the worst of you, that any discussion of philanthropy comes off as, virtue signaling, sanctimony,
Yeah.
and it's really
Because sometimes it is.
well,
That's the other thing.
it can be.
Someone told me that there are consultants in Hollywood that go to approach actors and say, you've got to have a charity side. No, you can't do that.
Right.
George does that. No, you can't do that. Brad does that one. There is one that no one's doing at the moment. Do this one. And it's like a PR thing. So I know why people are cynical. Businesses approach me to say, oh, you could do this funny thing and we give some of it to charity. And I look at the stats and I think, well, you're getting away with that because you're getting me for free.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving peanuts to the charity.
Right.
And I'm doing a multi-million-pound advert for you, if the truth be told. And, my first thought is, no, you're trying to con me there. That's not enough. That's not enough to the charity, But yeah.
But the flip side of this particular coin, I mean, the reason why I became sensitized to this dynamic, especially, is in considering the appeal of Trump to millions and millions of people. I mean, an appeal that was otherwise totally inexplicable to me. I just could not get my mind around why this figure was able to cultivate such a massive cult of people who love him, and many of whom will acknowledge that in many ways he's an awful person, right? I mean, there are very few people who will say, he's a truly deeply ethical, impeccable, honest human being. No, that's not the level at which they're worshiping him. They're worshiping something else. And what I realize is there's zero basis for sanctimony and judgment of his audience. He's telling his implicit message to his audience is, you are perfect just the way you are. You don't have to improve yourself. The people who think you need to change at all are elitist assholes who are our enemy. You are just fine with all of your appetites and all of your selfishness and your xenophobia.
That's a very attractive thing to hear.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to go. I thought I'd solved it, and I think we might be saying the same thing, because I thought that he got in as maybe the biggest protest vote in history, because people were tired of authoritarian liberals telling them what to do. So it grew and grew, and I could see the appeal, not of Trump, but I could see their appeal, because you're right, they didn't really care whether he did a good or bad job. He was annoying the liberal elite, so they thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that that's a major component, but in terms of the psychological relief that was arriving as a kind of subtext to everything he was doing and saying, I think it really is. I mean, there is something. There's not even the possibility of judgment or of being encouraged to judge yourself for anything. I mean, it doesn't matter if you cheat on your wife with a porn star, if you're you're obese and you eat nothing but cheeseburgers, whatever it is, you can't possibly judge yourself held up against the funhouse mirror of Trump.
Yeah.
And he's just saying, this is what life is. Greed, I mean, essentially, greed is good. You can show up this is something Trump's actually done. Trump has shown up at the ribbon cutting of a charity that he gave no money to just to get the PR, just to pretend to have supported the charity. And he gave no money to it, right? I mean,
Right.
it's like the most cynical stuff, and all of that is totally fine, right?
I saw a piece, it was a couple of years ago, in the thick of it. And someone said, the reason that no one can hold him to account is because he doesn't say one bad thing a week.
Yeah,
He says
he
a
says
thousand
1,000,
bad things
yeah.
a day.
Yeah.
So we might have discussed this, that they can't, that he was on to the next bad thing. So they couldn't do anything. But I think the system was a little bit broken as well.
Yeah,
And,
no question.
but
Just to bring this, just to close the loop on this, what I realized is some of the hate I get is, I've perceived as somewhat inexplicable, and I mean, much of it is obviously easily understood given the kinds of topics I touch. But I realized that there's something truly anti-Trumpian about the subtext about everything with respect to almost everything I communicate, which is there is an implicit judgment that you should do better, right? In so many of the topics I touch. I mean, just the topic you just raised here, philanthropy and doing good, and so all of the talk about this is putting an audience in tension with itself around questions of selfishness and am I generous enough, and what are my priorities in life, and all of that. It makes a certain cohort of people uncomfortable, right? I mean, just having to live an
Well,
examined life, and are you honest enough? Are you ethical enough? Are your priorities what you say they are? And do you have enough integrity? Like all of that's coming through. As much as someone might be interested in any of these topics, all of that's coming through as a kind of tension, and it is the absolute opposite of what Trump communicates to his audience. And
yes, but people, but that's assuming that people understand and agree with you what good and bad is, and most people don't. So, for your list of ways to live that are right,
mm,
based on all your values and sometimes objective truths about the world, and then they're not the agreed list. They're not the agreed
well,
list of how to live.
but they're largely agreed. I mean, so like the question of, say, there are very few people who would consciously say, lying and cheating and stealing and all of that is not only acceptable but good, right? But there are very few people who've just inverted common morality. So,
Well, yeah, but except they say, you've got to fight fire with fire. And they
mm,
say things like, yeah, but if we don't do it, someone else doing it, it'd be worse. And they say things like, yeah, but I carry all these guns for self-defense. And, good guys
yeah,
carry guns to stop bad
yeah.
guys.
Well,
And they've
I
always
do
got a
I do
good
carry guns
argument.
for self-defense.
Yeah, you should now. You're picking on an MMA
Yeah.
fighter. But what I'm saying is, there is always that it comes down to a certain, morality isn't absolute, and that's the problem with it. I have arguments on Twitter where people actually say, "You can't tell me without God what
Hmm.
good and bad is," and I'm stumped. And they say, "Who decides what moral?" I said, "But are you saying without a God, then you would rape and murder?" And sometimes they say, "Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I would,"
Yeah.
because which blows my mind. But it is an argument. It is an argument that without God, who is good and all powerful, we don't know. I always really, it's impossible to see their point of view, but I always try. I always think, oh, I know what they think, right? I know, and I try and find where we've gone wrong. I try and find where we departed on this road together. Where's the node? Where did we
I actually
part
think
company?
that particular point, I've run into that point before, and I feel like we may have talked about this at some point, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's an honest point. I think that is a piece of rhetoric that, in particular, Christians have learned, and they just, because this is something that came up in debate with Rick Warren. I don't know if his name has crossed the
Yeah.
pond, but he's this massive megachurch preacher in the U.S. I don't know if it's still the case, but at one point his book, The Purpose Driven Life, was the best-selling book of all time, apart from the Bible. And so I did a debate with him. It was actually a private debate. It was just in his office at his megachurch, moderated by John Meacham when he was
Mega church
the
makes me laugh.
yes, well,
Mega
to give you
church.
well to give you a sense of how mega this church was. This
Yeah.
church had a travel agency inside the church just to do church business. A full-time
Yeah.
travel agency staffed with 40 travel agents. That's how
Well,
big an operation this was.
yeah.
And so anyway,
Well, they invented Mega God.
yeah,
As soon as people came along and said this is the only God, and he controls everything, then there's no more. That's it.
no,
They've found Mega God. You got to go to Mega
yeah,
Church and give them mega money,
yeah.
and it
And
makes
you
total
need
sense.
a travel agency even when you have private planes, apparently, at that
I
point.
know,
Yeah.
I know, but I disagree with you that
But
it's
just to give
sorry.
to to give you this punchline, which you're all too familiar with. So we're debating this very point, and he says, without God, that there would be nothing to stop me, meaning him, raping and murdering, and he's basically. And I said, so you're basically claiming to be a psychopath, right? But for this handbrake of God's threat of hellfire, you'd be out there today raping and murdering. And he essentially said, yes, he would, right? But then
Yeah.
I said, well, how do you explain the fact that I, the atheist, am not out there raping and murdering? And he said, well, you have natural grace. But the truth is,
Oh.
I just don't think it's not an honest claim to having this scarcely
But wait a
repressible
minute.
desire to
Okay.
rape and murder, but for
No, I
your
know. I
religiosity.
think that, yeah, because it's not based, because the premise is a little bit shaky. They have to keep getting these strange juxtapositions with their arguments. They have to deal with every single one as opposed to it being, logical. But let's go back to these people. Some Christians, or they should all claim this. They believe, right, that there is an all powerful God, right, who's omnipresent, omnipotent, and kind and loving, and does the right thing. He knows the plan. He knows the future. He can't be wrong. He's perfect, right? That's their belief. Okay. So how do they know about this? Well, it was written in the Bible. It's the word of God. That Bible exists. That's the word of God, right? So now they know there are good and bad people, and it's random. Some of them are like Sam Harris. He's got natural grace. He's all right. He doesn't need it. But we can't afford everyone to be like that.
Hmm.
So we have to have a rule. So I do think they go back to thinking that if you believe there is an all powerful God in charge and that this word was put down, then I think they are being on it. They're wrong, but I think they're
Hmm.
being honest. Now, the thing is, this is where it goes badly wrong for them, is that they're hypocrites. Because if you really do believe there's an all powerful God watching you, then you wouldn't be taking private jets and being unfaithful and stealing. And you wouldn't be doing it. You'd
Hmm.
think, if I believe there was a God, Jesus Christ, I'd be on my best behavior.
Hmm.
It's like, if I really thought, if I do something wrong, I go to hell, I would never do anything wrong. That's the
Yeah,
truth,
except
isn't it?
we know it's not really about your behavior. You can kill and rape and steal your whole life, and as long as you accept Jesus into your heart at the last moment, you're good to go.
Yeah, so I wouldn't get into heaven, would I? Even if I haven't done all
Yeah,
those things,
we're
because
screwed. Yeah, we're both screwed.
we're outside
You can
watching
do
all the
all
murderers.
you can do all those bad commercials for insurance companies just to give the
Hold
money
on,
away to
though.
your favorite charities, and you're still going to hell.
So I'm watching all the murderers having a great time with all the people they murdered, and I'm outside.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
assume they're all getting along
With
because,
your cats and dogs that also didn't make it into heaven.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's a murderer, right, and he's forgiven, and he's all happy, and God loves him, right, and then there's someone he murdered. If the person he murdered says, "I'm not happy with this, God goes, well, you can leave. You can leave if you want," because
He
he
took my
said
name. He took my
sorry.
name but before he had even washed his hands of your blood, he took my name. So he's in there with you.
Yeah,
Enjoy the ride for eternity.
it doesn't seem like a fair system to me. So I wanted to ask you then,
Mm.
what do you think? If you could, you now, everyone listening, you could give them one tip that they could do that would improve their life, and I think we usually mean mental health and well-being and
Hmm.
happiness. So I guess you'd say meditation, wouldn't you, as the one tip?
Yeah, well, I'd say a few unsurprising things, but it's funny, given what we've talked about thus far, I'm alert to the prospect of all of it sounding self-serving and sanctimonious to be giving any advice of this sort. I mean, this is honest advice, but it is interesting that I feel like my immune system is hyper engaged on this point. Yeah, I mean, meditation is for me
What if you said now, just buy my book? Just buy my book.
exactly
You can get it on Amazon.com. It's
right.
$19.99 and it will solve all your problems. And that's all I'm going to say on the
That's
matter.
all I'm going to say. Yes, I will say nothing for free on this topic.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's one solution to everything, right?
No.
The solution exists on multiple levels because there are multiple levels at which problems can arise. So, within its purview, there is no substitute for getting regular exercise, right? I mean, yes, if you're not getting regular exercise,
I agree.
adding that
I
to your
agree.
life is just absolutely a step in the right direction at whatever
Yeah.
level you are. And there's nothing else that fills that need, right? So like getting enough sleep is not the same thing as getting exercise.
No,
Meditation
that's
isn't.
true. Yeah, I agree. I agree with it. I
Right.
agree. Totally both of those. That is enough sleep, is
Yeah, but
fantastic.
so they're all
Yeah,
they all all of these things are intrinsically good, and they're none is a replacement for anything else. But I would say the same thing about meditation, and I would say the same thing about honesty. In the end, I mean, just the ethical commitment to not lying to people,
yeah,
and
yeah. I'd
I mean,
say
those are
create.
so it's so
I'd say
clarifying of one's life.
I'd say create. I'd
Yeah.
say have something just like try and, just even if you just come up with, even if you write a poem and put it in the drawer, or,
Mm.
learn the piano or sketch or gardening. I just say, I think concentrating on focusing on something, on creating something that you did, pottery, anything, just, it doesn't, it can be rubbish, painting.
Mm.
I'd say create and play with the dog.
Mm.
Create, play with the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so yeah, that brings me back to the thing you said at the outset here when you asked people this question and you were surprised that no one got back with I need to make more money or I
Yeah.
need a new job. I think it's undeniable that there are changes there that are certainly helpful for most people. So, for instance, I think you and I have lost sight of the difference between having a job that you really don't like and having a job that is essentially you doing what you love anyway, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
and I are on the right
Yeah.
side of that equation, and
Absolutely. Just do it. Yeah, exactly.
it's
Just
an
whatever it
amazing
is.
privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Building your own cathedral, owning your own labor. I sound like Marx, but it's just so true. It's so true immediately. I can't believe how fast it was when I left a job, a PAYE as we call it, to just being, self-employed and doing my own thing. It was like an immediate freedom. It was like I was on holiday.
yeah.
It was that feeling of, oh, I'm on holiday for 2 weeks, on the beach. It was that feeling when I went, solo and did my own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the people, I mean, there are many, many millions of people now, especially, and it's been true for at least a year during the pandemic, who have rethought their occupation. And I do think, insofar as it's possible for any specific person to make a change in the direction of more creativity, more autonomy, a better fit between what they're doing to make money and what they would do anyway, just to because they love it. I mean, that
Yeah.
is just every increment that you can turn the dial in that direction. I do think is important in the end. It's an immense
Well,
privilege,
we've got a good question here from Leopold and Loveday, and he says, if aliens appeared to you both
Hmm.
and said, "What is going on here?" Right? I mean, I think they mean Earth. What would be the one thing you would show them or tell them that would best represent life on Earth as it is today? Now, my first thought was our achievements, skyscrapers, the beauty of, but then straight away that popped into my head was famine. And I thought, I'd have to say, look, what's going on here? I'm assuming they meant to get advice or just to shock them or just to show them what, but it's strange that was
Hmm.
I was trying to think of wonderful things and I couldn't get over famine. And I don't know why. I just think it was just what an alien would think of that. What's going on here? They'd say, why are there skyscrapers here and nothing here? I don't know what best sums up.
Hmm.
Like, it probably is the rat race, isn't it? It probably is commerce and having stuff, isn't it? Against all
Yeah,
we've
it's
said.
funny the direction you took that. I don't know that. I mean, one way to take it is to just exemplify the two extremes. The greatest beauty and the greatest ugliness.
Yeah.
On the greatest ugly.
War would, I mean, maybe war. We don't know what they'd say. Again, I'm assuming that this alien is all knowing and all powerful and knows what's wrong, as opposed to the slug creatures that I imagine they might be
Yeah,
without
who
fingers.
knows? They might like famine. That famine might be
They might
the
think
crunchy
that
goodness
is
at the center of the whole enterprise.
I know, totally topsy turvy. Yeah, yeah. But I struggled. I don't know what sums up. I just don't. I don't know one thing that does make us human, even from a evolutionary point of view. Why are we different to? I suppose
It's
language
interesting
comes
to
to mind.
consider it
Invention.
if you just speed up the experience and visualize any human life or really every human life more or less like time lapse photography. If you just
Yeah,
imagine, just go from childhood to adulthood to old age to death, over the course of 5 seconds, and you just see that the kind of
Yeah, that makes me think we're
proliferation
like
of
a
images.
fungus. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
Well, it's
matter. That,
well, it's,
when you put it like that, it just means, oh, we're just a fungus. We're just part of a bigger. Why are we even? Why
well,
do
no, but
we
you
consider
have to
this?
resolve all the beauty and ugliness to some degree. It can't just be a blur. But this was brought home to me the other day. We were watching some old home videos of our daughters, and in our current house, we've been in this same house for as long as our daughters have been alive. So these videos are strange because we have images of our daughters, let's say 7 years ago, in our kitchen or in our living room, where there are objects on the countertop that have basically not moved for all those 7 years, right? So we see it's like the
Yeah,
children have completely changed. They're like houseplants that have grown around
yeah,
a totally stable background of objects. I mean, literally, the phone hasn't moved an inch from where it was
yeah, yeah,
when my daughter was half the size, right? And
yeah.
it's just a bizarre. It has this sort of time lapse quality to it. It's just bizarre to look at emotionally. But
Yeah, I think about that, what a life is, how short a life is, how long it feels, and then how
mm,
short it is when you pull back. Like Carl Sagan's, was it Pale Blue Dot? That
yeah,
thing is just, incredible, mind blowing. How everyone that's ever lived, every thought, that it is mind blowing. And I was thinking as well that, well, we're talking about so-called altruism in the animal kingdom, that like an ant colony treats itself as one big organism. Some of them die for this and that, and they don't. It's just passing on their genetic material. The poisoned frog that gets eaten by the heron, but he saves other frogs because that heron never eats another frog. And I was thinking, we don't do that. But then I thought, well, I suppose soldiers in the two great wars did. A lot of them knew they were doing it for their grandchildren, or they might never meet.
mm,
And that made me sad as well. The people who give up their life early for that. That is beyond my imagination. That sort of altruism. It's unfathomable to think how selfish I feel and how spoiled we are that a 25-year-old said goodbye to his mum and dad and his wife and went off knowing that he probably wouldn't come back. That is just that.
although the truth is even worse in many of those cases. Certainly, if you're talking about World War I,
Yeah,
it was just sheer delusion. I mean, first of all, it was almost entirely pointless war, but people went off not with this detailed story of what they were sacrificing for. It was just this romanticized idea about war as a rite
yeah,
of passage, and it was
I
just
know.
kind of a religious delusion in many cases.
Well, in some cases, the bullets and weaponry were more valuable than the person.
Mm,
Like I heard a thing that there was one Russian battle where half the soldiers had guns. They went in the front, and when they died, the person behind them picked their gun up.
hmm yeah.
And again, just off the charts. I mean, I don't think we can get our head around that. And so, yeah,
This is basically our experience of Twitter. I hope that when I
I
go
know.
down, so I hope someone picks up
Imagine
my Twitter and carries on.
Imagine a first world soldier coming to you and going, "I've got to go to the front. What do I do?" And you said, "Well, meditation,
Mhm.
altruism, maybe buy my
Well,
book. You can buy my book for 19.90."
honestly, well, I know this will be met with some skepticism by you and by many others, but what I mean by meditation actually does apply even in the trenches. I mean, the idea
Right?
that there's no atheists in foxholes,
Yeah, that's not
there's
true.
something you can bring into the foxhole with you that can make a difference, even in extremis. Although I say that obviously not having been in that particular foxhole, but there are other
Yeah,
foxholes in life. One.
yeah. No, I will try it. Maybe I'll try it as an experiment for this chat. Maybe
Hmm,
I'll
all right.
try
Yeah.
it
Well,
and tell you how I get on.
I got an app. I can hook you up with a subscription to a meditation app if you
Yeah, sure,
need some help.
sure.
I
Okay,
I had one more question for
go on.
you that I feel like I raised this last time or a couple weeks ago and I gave you some homework, but I feel like you probably didn't do the homework. Maybe
Oh
you did. Did you watch any of the Beatles documentary?
no, I
All right.
haven't yet. I haven't yet.
Well, then
No,
I,
I've
I feel
got.
like that's homework. I wish you would.
Okay.
I wish you would do a couple of hours of it. It's long. I've only watched like 2 hours so far, but it's like eight
Okay.
hours.
I
But
mean,
I
you've
feel
made it
like,
sound unattractive by
yeah,
calling it homework and saying, "I wish you'd get through a couple of hours of it."
I
You
know.
know, this is.
This is what this is why you shouldn't hire me as a publicist. I put
I
all
know.
the pain up front.
I know.
This is gonna be.
I know. Sometimes it is, isn't it? It does feel like a chore. I'm
This is
so
a
spoiled
celebrated.
now.
This is a
Okay.
celebrated documentary
Okay.
by one of the world's great directors of found
Okay.
footage by the most beloved band ever, and I've managed to spin it as this awful chore to watch.
Is it on Netflix?
It's on Disney Plus. That's where you find it.
Have I got that?
You've
I
got to
don't know if I've
subscribe.
got that.
You
I'll check with Jane. I
Yes,
don't know if
find your
oh,
credit card,
this is
subscribe.
oh
But
God.
the reason why I just feel like I'm so unmusical that I don't really trust my intuitions about what I think is happening here. But you as someone who has at least a
As a
background in
failed
music,
musician, me as a failed
yeah,
musician knows more about
you're
it than
good
you who's
enough.
never tried.
Yes, exactly.
I've shown I failed,
You-
right? Which is better than not trying
yeah,
at all.
exactly. You know enough to know what to be envious of
Okay.
in Paul McCartney. So
Okay.
yeah,
One
so
day
just
I'll
watch some of it, so
oh
you
Jesus.
understand this cultural moment.
Okay, good.
Right.
My homework. Brilliant. And I want you to learn all about simulation theory.
I think I got that in hand. I've done my homework already.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There was a question, but I didn't. It was if we could all be part of a bigger computer or something, couldn't it?
Right.
That's not real. My answer to that is it might as well be. It isn't, but it
Mhm.
might as well be.
Right.
If
That's fine.
we're just vessels and yeah. So I've solved that one. Now the Beatles. Good. Okay.